I've heard you say that coding is effectively solved. You haven't written any code in 6 months. Sometimes I see engineers pushing back on this idea and they say, look, coding is not only about typing, it's also about judgment and taste and critical thinking, and agents can still be quite bad at those. So, what do you make of that critique? Like, are there parts of coding that remain unsolved, or is that, in your view, that's just has become something else?
Yeah, I mean, the critique is totally right. I think this is one of those things that just gets like kind of taken out of context. So, the full quote is coding is solved for the kinds of coding that I do. And like for me, like I work on pretty simple code bases, like Claude CLI, like the CLI is like a pretty new code base, like the desktop app and the mobile app. Like these are pretty small, simple code bases. We have so many enterprise customers, like a lot of our customers now are like the biggest enterprises. It's not just like startups and indie devs anymore. It's like NASA is one of our customers. So it's like, they have a really big, really complicated code bases. And so for them, like it's not solved yet. Like the model's still not perfect at it. It still makes mistakes. Its code isn't always perfect. And when you think about the kinds of stuff that engineers do, coding is a small percent of it. It used to be that it's like, if you look at my day, maybe like 50% of my day used to be like actually like typing code. But then the other 50% was like talking to users. It was brainstorming and coming up with ideas. It was like debugging and kind of just thinking through how something works. It was planning. There's just all these other things that engineers do that are not coding. So when I say coding is solved, it's like it's solved for the kinds of coding that I do, and coding is just a small subset of what engineers do. And you actually see this, for all the engineers at Anthropic, and I think more and more engineers in the industry. When the model does the coding, they're freed up to do all this other stuff that they actually enjoy doing a lot more, like
Right.
like talking to users and like figuring out what's next. And Claude Code has been just 100% written by Claude Code for over 6 months. That's true for a lot of things at Anthropic. Beyond Claude Code, that's true for Cowork. It's true for a lot of other products. And we're starting to hear more and more customers like this. Like, I was doing a talk for the latest Y Combinator batch. This was like earlier this week. We did a fireside, and I used to ask at the beginning of every talk I do, raise your hand if you use Claude Code. Now everyone uses Claude Code, so I stopped asking that question. And so instead, the question that I asked is, raise your hand if 100% of your code is written by Claude Code. And, this is like the latest, with the most cutting edge startups, but they're all small startups. Usually it's like a few people. Um, Half the hands went up. And then I was like, okay, raise your hand if none of your code is written by, the model. And there's one hand that went up. This is out of a
Ooh,
room of like a couple hundred people. And then
yeah.
everyone else is somewhere in between. They were like between 50 and 100%. So I think like is coding is starting to get solved for like a bigger and bigger percent of the code that we write. Like our team is an early indicator of what's happening in engineering. Engineering is an early indicator of what happens to everything outside of engineering. And so we're starting to kind of see this shift, and it started 6 months ago. And yeah, it's like it's accelerating, and we're starting to see more and more hands go up when I ask like, is it 100%?
Let me ask about another fear that people have about a world where the engineers aren't writing as much code. The fear is that people's understanding of their own profession will atrophy, and that might be dangerous in various ways. You haven't written any code in 6 months. Do you feel like that atrophy has started with you? And how do you feel about it?
There's one engineer on the team, Lena, that was still writing like C++ on the weekends by hand just for fun. Because she like still enjoys like writing the code. And I think there's always room for this. I think for me, this is part of like a much broader transition, and it's not about atrophy at all. It's just about like programming is always a thing that is in flux. Like my grandpa programmed in punch cards, like back in the Soviet Union, like 70 years ago. And for him, that was programming. Like there was no JavaScript, there was no, Python. That didn't exist yet. For him, it was punch cards. It was like piece of paper. There's a machine that like punches holes in it. Then you feed it into this mainframe. It processes it. Like a few lights light up. And when you talk about programming, like that's what it was. And then, like before that, like the Apollo program, it was like there was a room full of people, like often like women, like doing math on paper, sometimes like by hand. That was called programming.
Right.
And nowadays, like this changed. Like programming became writing machine code, then it became writing assembly code, then it became like JavaScript and Python, Java, all these languages that people use nowadays. And now it's like changing again. It's now you talk to the agent, and it's actually I think about to change one more time, where you talk to an agent that talks to agents that does the coding. Um, but it's just always changed like this. It doesn't feel like atrophy to me. It feels like it's like a sea change in the technology.
My feeling about it has been that like I'm sure that using a graphing calculator like caused some of my math skills to atrophy, but my solution to that is that I will just continue to use a calculator, like I'm sort of fine to cede some of that stuff. Now if over time the calculator becomes super intelligent and tries to undermine me in subtle ways, like that would sort of freak me out. But maybe we haven't like crossed that bridge quite yet. Let me ask about another criticism that I sort of feel like is in this realm, which is it seems like every time a new model is released, we'll hear people say this is really good, and then you check Reddit a few weeks later, and they say the product has massively regressed. My sense that sometimes this is like a real issue caused by bugs. Other times it's just sort of a vibe. But I feel like people are concerned that because it's all just sort of AI generated right now, there isn't maybe sort of the same craftsmanship that we once saw in code. So I'm just curious what you make of these periodic backlashes we seem to see.
Yeah, it's actually sort of an open question what causes it. There's been a couple instances where it was real, and there was two that I know of, and we published like engineering, blog posts on the Anthropic blog about it because like if it's real, like we found it, we fixed it, and then we want to talk about it so people kind of understand exactly what happened. But I think in almost every other case, it's sort of like maybe it's like a honeymoon period where you kind of get used to the model, and at first it's magical, and then you kind of get used to it. Maybe it's something like that.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's really about craft because the model's code at this point is just much better than the code I would have written.
Hmm.
If you talked to me like a year ago, I would not have said that. I would have said the model is like kind of sloppy and like the code's not really good. You have to like triple check everything. It can make silly mistakes all the time. But that's just like simply not the case anymore. And again, it's just the model keeps changing. It's really weird because every other technology we use does not change this fast. But there's like if you tried the model for the last time, like a year ago, the model now is completely different. And so if a year ago you had to hand hold it and you had to triple check every line, now I just generally like let Claude do its thing. I ask Claude to double check the result. I ask Claude to like open the app and test it by itself. And then, while I do that, I have like, 15 other Claudes running that I've also asked to like do stuff like this.
Right.
But that's kind of what it is now. It's the code is actually just much better than what I would have written.
Hmm. But let me ask you about your Claude Swarm then. You asked me earlier whether computers make me more productive. I think it seems clear that Claude is making you more productive, but it doesn't seem like it's actually reducing the amount of work that you're doing. And I think this is kind of like an important thing to dig into if we're curious like what AI means for jobs, because it sounds like you believe companies are going to need fewer engineers, and yet at least for you, like you're never running out of things to do. So like how do you think about that, like that question of it's making me so much more productive, I'm not working any less? Will there ever be a case where making me more productive actually means I'm working less?
Yeah, I mean, there's like a name of there's like some paradox. I forget what it was, but there's someone that named this thing.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I think that it's actually really individual.
Mm,
There's some parts of it that where it's up to the company because like depending on the business, there might be more need for people or less need for people. But I think actually a lot of it is individual preference. There was like like when the laundry machine was released. I'm gonna give like historical info because for me, this is a crazy technological change. Like I need history to kind of anchor myself.
no,
So this
I
is just
love it.
like
I love the stories.
okay, yeah. So this is just how I think about it.
Yeah.
So like when the laundry machine was released, I think the average person to do a load of laundry, it took like 5 or 6 hours, and you had to walk. There was some estimate of like 3,000 feet or something from one load of laundry. Because like the way that it worked is like you had to walk outside and you had to like collect the logs and the coals and you go back inside and you start a fire, you boil the water, then you take it out, you put in the laundry, you like scrub it on the scrub board, then you have to wring it out, and then you might have to like repeat this for like your entire family, maybe like every day. And it was just like a lot of work. And at some point, the laundry machine appeared, and it just took it down like a lot. I think it took like 3 hours off the time it took to do a load of laundry. And this was one of the factors that let women enter the workforce in mass.
Hmm.
Like without this, like usually it was the women of the house, like not always, but usually doing this work. And then this means like you were just like stuck at home and you couldn't do anything else. But now it's like 3 hours freed up every day. And so like different people could choose how they want to spend this time. And maybe for some people the choice was, well, I just want to like hang out with my kids, or like I want to go like, walk the dog or read a book or hang out with my friends. But actually for a lot of people, the answer was, okay, I'm ready to enter the workforce. Like I want to go like work at a factory, or like I want to go work an office job. And because the time was freed up, now you have this choice of what you want to do with this time. And I think it's kind of similar right now. It's like it's similar for any technology. It gives you more choice.
Yeah. Hmm. A couple of last questions about the software engineering. I've been asking all of our guests if a 22-year-old just finished their CES degree this month and came up to you and said, "Okay, now what?" What do you say to them? Like, is there an entry level job that is out there waiting for them, or do they need to like think differently about this like first part of their career?
My advice would be, if you're a person that wants to work at a big company, or you want to work like at a company, you can totally still do this. Like there are entry level jobs. There's a lot that you can do. But actually, if you're at all entrepreneurial, go start a startup. It's
Hmm.
just like there's never been a better time in history to start a startup. Like it's just absolutely the golden age. It's like you and your agents can build a giant company. Like people are building like billion-dollar companies, and it's just like a few people. Like for
Hmm.
Claude Code originally, it was just a few of us. And, we have so many customers where they're building like really big businesses and just really amazing startups. And it's just like, like one or two or three people. And one person with the right idea has so much leverage. I just couldn't imagine a better time to go and do it.
That's interesting because I feel like a lot of the view that we get from the AI world is like, model capabilities are advancing so quickly that like, will we even have companies in 5 years? But
Mm.
like, you think that, at least for the next bit, there's still plenty of room to start a company, get into business, make a product, all the rest.
At least for the next few years. I mean, if you really trace out the exponential, it gets really weird. I mean, there's like a version of it where like the idea of jobs kind of doesn't make sense anymore. The idea of companies doesn't make sense. The idea of software doesn't make sense. But, as you trace the exponential, it just gets weird. But I think in the meantime, there's so much to do. And, we're all just here kind of figuring out what the model means and what this thing can do. So might as well be one of these people that's exploring the frontier.
Yeah. All right. Last one on the engineering. If 3 years from now, do you think we will see more engineers, fewer engineers, or will it be impossible to answer because we just might not be calling them engineers anymore?
Okay, I think okay, let's define it.
Yeah.
I don't think we're gonna call them engineers, but if we talk about like people writing code, or people like using agents, like people using Claude to write the code, I think there will be 100 times more engineers than there are today. That's my
Wow.
prediction.
Wow. Okay. All right. Super interesting. Well, this seems like a good time to return to Claude Cowork, which you brought up earlier, and I know that you helped to develop. I would say this is the Anthropic product that I actually use the most now. I use it as a kind of editor on my columns. I use it to help me produce a podcast. I've been using it as a kind of financial advisor. Basically, you just create products, you add some skills, and it can kind of successfully imitate lots of different roles in a workplace. Also, as a non-technical person, I just find the UI very intuitive to use because it mostly just involves like dropping documents into a box. Talk to me a little bit about the road ahead for cowork, and in particular I'm curious whether you think it can solve for other jobs the way that coding is maybe now partially solved.
Cowork is just so exciting because we first started to build it when we saw people like abusing Claude Code essentially for things that are not coding.
Yeah.
Like like someone like installing the terminal so that, and like opening up their terminal, installing Claude Code in the terminal so they could do like their tax returns. And like this is like crazy. It's like that's not what a terminal was for, but it's like
Right.
amazing from a product point of view because like people really want this.
Yeah.
Um, I think the journey the next few months is going to be figuring out like how do we make this work really well for people that are not engineers. And this is something actually kind of new for us because most of our team works on coding, and now part of the team works on cowork, and we're trying to kind of figure this out. For coding, it's actually pretty easy because the people building this are engineers, and so we just kind of build for ourselves, and it's really useful for everyone else. With cowork, one of the harder things has been it's useful for just like everything that's not engineering. It's like it's useful for accounting and finance, and also for legal, and also for like I used it to like buy it like a clamming license so I can go clamming with like like the state of Washington. I used it, like I said, to like book flights. and like concert tickets. It kind of does all this different kind of stuff. And so how do you make sure it's actually really good at all this stuff? And so I think the biggest thing is like we use it all day, every day. We talk to customers all day, every day. And then I don't know, we just do the things that, a lot of customers are asking for. So I would
Right.
expect it to just like keep getting better at this stuff. I would expect it to keep getting better at running for long periods of time. And this is
Mm.
something that we saw for coding. Like a year and a half ago, Claude Code could run maybe like, 30 seconds without me having to interrupt it because the model just wasn't there yet at all. It just would go off the rails after 30 seconds. And now, like I run Claude for just hours and hours and hours. And every night I have like, hundreds or sometimes thousands of agents that are just running 5, 10, 20 hours. And this is just how engineering is done now. And I think the same thing will happen with cowork. I don't know like what the kind of work is where you would want it running that long, but I think we're going to figure it
Mhm.
out because I think people are going to start to like knock down the doors and demand it because like they really want this.
It's an interesting question to think about. Like, honestly, it makes me feel a little bit insecure because if you're like, Casey, like, what's a task that you wish Claude could work on for 20 hours for you? Like, I would sort of flail a little bit. It doesn't take 20 hours for me to like report and write a story or make a podcast. But, then again, I think once that becomes available, maybe I figure something out. So maybe that's just sort of brings us back to the capability overhang that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's so hard to predict the future because this technology is so weird. But I think once you actually use the technology and like you use it every day, you kind of feel like you know what's missing because you feel it.
Yeah.
So it just becomes more obvious. I
I
think if
mean,
you asked me that same question like a year ago, like would I have run an agent for 20 hours? I would have been like, no, that doesn't make any sense. I have no idea what I would use it for. But now I do this like all the time.
and I suppose one thing that it can do, maybe that it doesn't today, is just like anticipate your needs, right? Like as it develops a better sense of who you are and what you do, as its memory improves, it can probably do a better job of guessing, like, okay, like Casey, you got 4 more episodes of this podcast. You haven't booked the final 2 guests. I'm gonna brainstorm a list of those guests. I'm gonna draft some initial reach out emails. Like I'll put them in your drafts folder. Let me know if you want me to send them. Like these are the sort of things that I could imagine some like a human producer or coworker doing for me. And I can't imagine a world in the not too distant future where something like cowork is doing something similar.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe it also kind of depends like how do you define a task? Like maybe there's like a horizontal way and like a vertical way. Like maybe one way of thinking about it is like a task is everything related to design, or everything related to engineering, or everything related to like finance. But maybe like another way is like this kind of more vertical way. And like something that I experience every day now is I use Claude to do something. Let's say build a feature, and then Claude will like build the feature, it'll test it, and then it'll merge it, and then it'll kind of like launch the feature for me. Like just maybe something in Claude Code or something in Cowork. And then something that Claude started to do with Opus 4.7 is it started to become a lot more proactive. And a thing I've started to see it do is it'll launch the feature and then it'll be like, okay, great. I'm going to schedule a reminder for myself in 12 hours so I can like see what the user feedback is. And so if there's like any bugs, I can like go and fix that. And this is something I would have had to do and like remember to do. And I probably, I might have forgotten to do it. And so like when Claude does this, it's just like delightful. So I'm like, okay, thanks Claude. Thanks for kind of like thinking ahead a little bit. So yeah, there might be a
Right.
little bit more of that.
Hmm. I also want to toss in a question about Claude Mythos. This model is not available externally yet to most people. What we have heard about it from you all so far mostly concerns coding and cybersecurity. But I imagine that some version of it will come out before too long, and it will probably be good at stuff beyond coding. So I wonder, like, in your opinion, is Mythos relevant to the jobs question? Like, does this feel kind of like another step down the road of like the jagged frontier being able to do more work?
Yeah, I mean, it's another point along the exponential. This one, I think this one's a little further along than most of the jumps we usually make. This one is a particularly big jump. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, Mythos was particularly strong with cyber and with coding, and maybe there's some future version of it that's, strong in other capabilities also.
Yeah. Well, as we start to like zoom out a little bit and maybe talk about the implications of a world where more jobs are disappearing due to automation or maybe just transforming quite a lot. I think you've said in the past that you do think that this transition is going to be painful for a lot of people. Um, And Anthropic is in a unique position here, right? Like potentially it will be a source of unemployment among software engineers or people in other jobs. Does the company have an obligation to those people? Is that something that the government needs to be paying attention to? Or what do we do about this world that seems to be coming into being?
Yeah, like I said, I think it's gonna be mixed like it is for any technology. There's gonna be good effects and there's gonna be bad effects. And we don't know the exact timing. We don't know the exact mix. Like you can just never predict it in the moment. Um, I feel like I do feel this pretty immense obligation, just like as an engineer, that, there's always more that we should be doing to tell people about kind of what's coming. Make sure they're able to use the tools, kind of educate them and bring them along into the future. So I actually feel this very strongly, and it's something that like the team and I actually talk a lot about. I think that broadly, this is not a problem that we can solve. This is bigger, than one company, and you actually like really don't want one company to solve it because it could be the wrong solution. So I think like this is a society wide question. It's something that we should be talking about. It's something that we should be debating. And I think the thing that Anthropic is trying to add to the mix is we put out economic reports, we talk about policy, and we generally just, try to make it really obvious what we're seeing so that everyone else can decide what we do about it.
Yeah. I mean, I do think the number one thing that has gotten people to take these issues more seriously is just improvement in the quality of models, which I guess makes sense. Like when it's just purely at the realm of the theoretical, people have a hard time thinking through, okay, what do we do next? But then, once you like see a computer use itself, for example, I think a lot of people have that moment of like, okay, it's time to develop a strategy here.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is I think like one of the reasons why we build product at Anthropic. Like we're a AI safety lab. It's actually kind of weird to even build product. It's like really not obvious like why we should be like doing that at all. But actually one of the biggest arguments for building product, and this is like actually a debate like early on in Anthropic days. And one of the biggest arguments was we want people to experience it so that they can understand it, so that they can kind of play a part in figuring out like as a society what we should do. But if you like keep this technology locked away, so no one knows what it can do and no one can experience it, it's much harder for people to form a point of view about it.
Yeah. I also wonder if you've thought at all about like the let me start that one again. Our most recent guest on the show is James Manuka from Google, who's kind of studied like technology at the level of economies and whole societies, and he's really worried about what started out as a kind of digital divide. So not everyone having equal access to technologies like the internet or maybe a good laptop. And he's worried that that's about to transform into an AI divide. And it seems like the data that we've seen so far shows that the people who are getting the most out of AI are the ones already sort of like near the top of the income ladder. From your perspective, like, does Claude Code make that better or worse? Like, who do you see actually using it and not using it? And are there efforts to try to, maybe get it into the hands of people who haven't always had access to these kinds of cutting edge technologies?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple programs to do things like this to kind of like just spread access, and Anthropic does this. I think the thing that I've been just continuously surprised by is the people that get the most value out of Cloud Code and use the most are just not at all the people I expect most of the time. Like we just did this hackathon for Opus 4.7 release, and the people that won the hackathon are not actually professional engineers largely. There was like one person that was there was an electrician, there was a doctor, there was a carpenter that like that used it to build an app. And we actually saw the same thing with our last hackathon with the 4.6 hackathon. Before that, I think it would have been like mostly engineers, but I think now the models are sophisticated enough that it's actually like not even engineers a lot of the time that are learning how to like really harness them. And
Mm,
this is a thing that we're seeing at kind of big customers also. So like as companies think about how do you adopt AI tools, obviously you have to think about how do you do this kind of like business process change? How do you put Claude at the center? This is like the biggest question. And every company is approaching it kind of differently. One of the ways that I've seen work the best is you just give everyone tokens. You make everyone feel safe experimenting, and the ideas will come from the people that you don't expect a lot of the time. It's
mm.
not actually the like super senior engineer that was like the most productive in the past. actually the best idea might be like an accountant somewhere in the corner of the org, or it might be like a GTM person somewhere in a different corner of the org that like built some amazing internal dashboard that just like sped everything up a lot, or like solved some important problem that like no one even realized the business had. So I think actually like this is the future, and like this is the thing that we're going to start seeing a lot more of, and it's going to keep being surprising. And so like,
Mm.
yeah, it's important that people learn how to use the tools, because it's not necessarily the people that are, the most productive and the best with the tools of today that are going to be the best with the tools of tomorrow.
Hmm. Hmm. All right. Well, we've talked a few times so far about how difficult it is to like think through what life is going to look like in an exponential. So I'm going to try not to ask you to predict out too far. But if we had you back in a year, how much of the world of, let's just maybe keep it to software engineering, will look very recognizable, and how much would look a little crazy to us from today's perspective? A year from now, is there a world where you think we do start to see some of that automation kicking into gear, some, more big layoffs at companies that where they're citing AI as an example? What do you think we're going to be looking at?
I think there's going to be a lot of disruption in the next year. I think there's going to be a lot of big players that try to figure it out, and I think a lot of them will be successful. I think we're going to see some like traditional business modes go away. Like there's all these different modes that companies have, and some of them are here to stay, even despite AI. And then I think some of them are going to matter a bunch, less because of AI. And this, so like a moat like network effects, that's actually like not going to go away. Like if you have like an app that gets more valuable with more people being on the app, it doesn't matter like who's building the app, or whether AI exists or kind of is an important force or not. Like that's still like just as important. If you think about
Right.
like scale economies, so like as you manufacture, the marginal cost of goods kind of goes down over time. There's like kind of a natural advantage your business gets from that, and I don't think that's really going to go away. But actually, other moats are going to go away. And so this is, for example, like switching costs. So like,
Hmm.
you're on vendor A and you want to move to vendor B. Actually, Claude can probably just move you from A to B. And like the,
Hmm.
the switching cost is not a giant moat anymore.
Yeah.
So I think businesses that depended on some of these moats that are going away are, they're not going to do well. I think a lot of them are going to figure out new moats. And actually, if you look at like all the big businesses today, like the biggest companies, they actually have a number of moats, because this is something they think about all the time. Like, how do we have a defensible business? So it's actually like not that new to them. And then I think, some companies are going to continue to do well. And I think there's just going to be, if I had to predict something that would be surprising today, it's that there's going to be a lot more innovation than we expect. I
Hmm.
think there's going to be a lot of new ideas coming from not big companies, but tiny startups of like 1 or 2 or 10 people. And I think the number of these startups is going to explode. There's going to be so many new startups exploring these ideas, because again, just like the leverage of one person is going to be insane. Like
Right.
at this talk at Y Combinator, there's a bunch of companies working on a bunch of different stuff. There's one startup working on like material discovery. So they were, they had this deck and they were talking about how, there was the Iron Age, and then, there was like the Stone Age, and there was like the Iron Age, and now we're in the Silicon Age. And if we can discover the new material, then this is how we get into the next stage. And this is something where, as a tiny startup, there is just no way you would have been able to fund this, years ago. But now they're just using Claude to kind of discover this and kind of like scan over all the possible molecules and kind of ways to design these materials. And a team of just a few people can maybe make this kind of breakthrough where, 20 years ago, no way.
Right. So the companies may be smaller, but maybe some of the ideas are going to get better, and we're just going to see rapid growth among these small startups that have some kind of insight.
That's
Yeah.
my bet. It's like someone that knows the domain really well and has an army of Claudes can just do so much more than, what they could have done before, even if they had like
Yeah.
an army of humans doing
Yeah.
this.
If you have sort of sold one message consistently on this podcast, Boris, it has been buy as much Claude as possible at all times for all things. That's sort of what I'm getting coming across. Um, but it makes sense for the creator of Claude Code.
Yeah,
Final
I
question
mean,
for you.
we're
Oh
we're
yeah, go
just
ahead.
like we're just like so. This is like hard to explain. Like I work at Anthropic, so like I have to kind of like sell Claude.
Yeah.
But I think actually in a lot of ways, like we just use Claude for everything, and there is this divide between kind of the way that we use it, and I think the way that everyone else does. And so this is also kind of part of the job is to be like actually like You put Claude at the center, and it can do totally new things that you didn't expect.
I mean, it speaks to what you said earlier, which is that if you want like AI to make you or your company more productive, you probably need to redesign your workflow around it and not just try to staple it onto some existing process. But and I think that there's evidence that is true.
Right.
Um, Last question for you. In addition to everything that you are doing with Claude Code and Cowork, you are also amazingly omnipresent on X and Threads. I see you every day troubleshooting users' problems, offering tips on how to use Claude. If you could automate that part of your job, would you? And how close are we to that world?
I have automated it, but I prefer to do it myself.
Okay. Okay.
I actually the way that I did it is I have like a loop set up in Claude Code, and now I've actually moved it to a routine, and it just runs every 30 minutes. And Threads has an API, X has an API, and so it just uses it, and it's really easy to aggregate the feedback and look at it. But actually, my favorite part of my job is just interacting with people, even if they're saying something is broken or something doesn't work, or it could be like 10 times better. That's still my favorite thing because that lets us make the product better. And there's this thing in product where sometimes people look back and they're like, wow, this was like a moment of genius, or, like this product was, like someone conceived of it and just like built it and it was like perfect. And that's just like never the way it ever works.
Mm,
And, like Claude Code has so many flaws. It's so far from like being the product that it could be. And the only way to make it better is to listen to people, especially when they say something doesn't work, and to like keep improving it and keep making it better. And this is actually the way that awesome product is built. And this is the only reason that Cloud Code, it's still so far from amazing, but it improves a little bit every day. And
mm.
that's the reason.
I mean, it strikes me that's also a really like human part of your job, right? Like when you're talking to somebody who is using a product that you made, it's probably reminding you why you started doing it in the first place, right? And I feel like those moments of connection are like feel really important at a time when we're not always sure what our value is going to be that we're bringing to like an AI enabled workplace.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. And yeah, like we're all trying to figure this out together. This is sort of the thing. Like we have some hypotheses about where this is going. There's a bunch of stuff that we're building because, we think we know where it's going, but I'm actually often wrong. Like not all of my guesses are right. Often good ideas come from, all sorts of people, and you never